Just fill out the poll, and I will begin in a minute. Just waiting for a few more people to fill out the poll, and then I'll close it. Just waiting for apparently 3 more people to fill out the poll, and we can begin.
Morning. If you're just joining us, please take a moment to fill out the poll. Let us know where you're from, what your role is.
If you're credentialized or not, if you're a
Mhm.
supervisor, you OMH staff, things along that nature. Just a couple questions, not long. Says we need 2 more people to fill out the poll. But
We
I'm
have,
about to close this so we could get started.
thank you for those. A couple people have just joined us. Thank you for joining us. We're here with TJ Curtis today. My name is Ashley Sindoni. I'm the Family Workforce Development Coordinator. TJ will be telling us about FPAs working with families with substance abuse.
So,
You may introduce yourself in the chat with your name, organization, location, and role.
all right.
Are you all set with this poll, TJ?
Excuse me.
Are you set with the poll?
I'm set with the poll. I downloaded it. If anyone else missed the poll, please just put in the chat your name, your location. Are you like Western New York, Central New York, Hudson River, New York City, or Long Island? If you're a credentialized FPA, if you're a supervisor, or if you're OMH staff. Can everybody see my screen? Thumbs up.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
can see it, TJ.
All right.
Thank you.
Welcome. So our objectives today is the role of our FPA supporting these families. We're going to look at understanding substance abuse. We're going to look at the acknowledgement of the stigmas and challenges families face with substance use is present and the impact on the families. What are the challenges, what that looks like, and strategies to best support families while receiving treatment and other services, because usually we're not just receiving one service. So, understand substance abuse in families. So, substance abuse disorder is chronic, relapsing conditions that affects the brain and behavior, leading to compulsive use of substances despite harmful consequences. It's recognized as a medical and behavioral condition. Pardon me. Oh my gosh. As a medical condition and not a moral failing, because a lot of times when we experience our families just personally, we might look at our family members as failing, and that's when some of those biases might come up when we're working with families. And to negate that, we have to look at it what the true issue is at hand. So generally, people get into drugs, whether it's genetic, right? Because some of us are genetically predisposed to being alcoholics or using harder drugs. And usually there are gateways, as we have understood in the past 10, 20 years, there are gateway drugs. But then what I'm understanding, the chemical components that happens to the brain and what dependency looks like, um, it becomes you get trapped. A lot of people get trapped in the cycle of using. So it can be substance abuse varies in severity from mild, moderate to severe. As I was kind of saying earlier, some people can dabble, and using narcotics and alcohol and have virtually no issues going along in their regular life. For other people, it becomes a dependency. So the difference between use, misuse, and use, misuse, and disorders. Use is an occasional or appropriate use of substances without negative consequences, like people maybe going out on Friday night after work for happy hour. Then you have people, the misuse is the risky or unhealthy behaviors, binge drinking or mixing, that say even if you're taking painkillers or alcohol, things along that nature equates to misuse. And then we have the disorder, continued use despite harm with loss of control, cravings, and interference in daily functioning. So if we understand the distinctions, helps FPAs approach families with compassion and not judgment. So the impact on families, we have disrupted communication and trust. Substance use can lead to secrecy, denial, or conflict within the family. Trust often breaks down, and honest communications becomes difficult, leading to isolation and a misunderstanding. And then there's a trauma and instability for children. Children living in homes affected by substance abuse often experience emotional neglect, unpredictability, and fear. There's exposure to these stressors. Um, Exposure to these can affect development and school performance and long-term emotional health. And then also leads to more generational use and abuse if it's not taken care of early. So then the strain on relationships and supports. Family members may experience burnout, financial hardships, or emotional exhaustion. Relationships often become strained as loved ones struggle between wanting to help and protecting their own well being. And then FPAs can help by facilitating open communication, linking families to support groups, and reinforcing healthy coping skills. So, what is our role as an FPA when working with these families? So, providing non judgmental, lived experience based support. So, a little bit about me. I wasn't really, I couldn't say I was a chronic user or anything. So, I was hit by a car 15 years ago. I had an entrapped nerve. Long story short, I had to undergo two surgeries. But because it was so extensive, my doctor prescribed a lot of pain medicine. So, was it like, well, like oxycodone, things along that nature. But I was on it for a long time. But I made a conscious decision to step back and quit cold turkey. Now, mind you, I was on this for about 6 months. I was out of work, maybe 2 or 3 months, lost my job. So, because I couldn't go back to work. Well, it was only then when I started to understand what the addiction was for dope or heroin, because pain pills are usually heroin based substances, right? So when I started to understand, I'm like, why do people, in my head beforehand, why do people get addicted to it? Like, this makes no sense. So when I went cold turkey from it, I began to understand what it was affecting and how it happened. So continuous lose, especially in this particular area, your body stops making dopamine. Now, most people don't even understand that basic things like walking, talking, breathing, it actually hurts your body. And you have a constant flow at a nice level for your appropriate level for your body to maintain optimal function. So you don't feel these things unless you get injured. So when you are on painkillers for such a long time, your body stops making it. Thus, you become reliant on the drug to fill in that pocket that your body's no longer making. So I went through that pain. So it was like the worst week of my life, but I still refused to take anything besides like Tylenol. And after that week was over, it was done. So my body began to make its own dopamine again. So just from that experience alone, I learned not to judge people who are trying to get off of drugs, especially that the relapse. Because I understand, I went through it physically myself. I don't wish this on anybody else, but it helped with my role as an FPA. It's when I got a family member who was dealing with painkillers or dealing with any type of narcotics, but they were wanting to get off, but kept having these relapses kept falling off their progress. So it's important to have this non-judgmental, and I have this lived experience, right? So when people saw me and I came up, it wasn't from a place of, oh, I'm just book read. I've experienced this too, but this is what it looked like for me. And I don't expect anyone to do what I just did. Um, but it would help me bridge the gap in communication with families who might have been along those roads. So a non-judgmental approach invites openness. Families more likely to share honestly when they feel seen and not blamed. Using empathy and validation reminds families that recovery is possible and they're not alone in their journey. So, from that, building trust with families experiencing shame or stigma. Many families carry guilt, fear, or shame around substance use. Trust takes time and consistent care to build. So, then we're going to be transparent about your role and respect confidentiality to create a sense of safety. Obviously, as our FPAs, we understand that it is confidential unless they're trying to hurt themselves or others or be in detriment in some way, shape, or form. So we show genuine compassion and patience, and trust grows through small, respectful interactions over time. We can't expect our family members to just go cold turkey. We can't expect their treatment to be done in a month or two. It will take time. It will take a lot on our end to continuously just show support when they reach certain milestones. If they're actually continuously not using and they're showing up for meetings, things along that nature. So then our role is also to help families navigate treatments and recovery systems. We support families in understanding complex systems because this is when it becomes a bit more complex than just trying to fill out forms for housing or food stamps, right? We got to figure out treatment facilities. Do they take insurance? How long do that? It becomes more extensive. And then from detox to long-term recovery, what does that look like, and how can we best support them? We will assist with referrals, appointments, and understanding terminology or treatment options, because especially a lot of people who are under the influence can be distorted. It gets confusing, and denial can seep back in, and they might not want to approach it anymore. Excuse me. Empowering families to advocate for their needs and ask questions. System navigation is a form of empowerment and not dependency. And then we're empowering families to be part of the recovery process. So encourage families to view recovery as a collective journey where every member plays a role in the healing. Reinforce that family involvement improves treatment outcomes and long-term recovery and stability. And then we help families identify set strengths, goals, and celebrate their milestones together, empowering growth through participation and success. And I just wanted to touch on something to not let go, because family members with the family we're working with might have anxiety, anger, feel a way about this family member who might have indirectly or directly damaged the family's dynamics. And a lot of people, or at least on the receiving end, will say, well, I was on drugs. It's not fair. But in our roles as FPAs, we have to also empower this individual to understand that yes, you may have been going through this, but they went along this with you in their own way, and they are still hurting, and now they need recovery too. So a lot of this stuff is not, it's not just necessarily about the individual, but it's about how it's impacting that nuclear family, whatever that family looks like, because everyone's affected whether they're using or not, and they need to hear this before, during, and after. And I have experience with family members going through this, and when we finally reconnected, I kind of let them have it the first time about how they impacted the family, but I also kept the open door communication policy, but with boundaries. It's an important role too, because sometimes people say, "Oh, I'm better, I'm clean, I've been this way for a year," and those boundaries might drop, and then you, God forbid, it happens, you might revisit a situation as if the person falls off the band, and goes back to using, depending on what life event may have sparked um, the going backwards. Do we have any questions or comments before we move forward? I like this to be a bit interactive.
Uh, TJ, I just wanted to share that I like the way that you are expressing the nature of addiction, as I am recovered for 19 years, but I have experienced it as the person on both sides of it, as the person who cares about somebody who's active, and as the person who is active. And it's challenging in how people see it because there's a major focus on evidence based and medications and things, as opposed to like issues that I see personally in my experience as more of the core of it and the things that aid people in recovering. So I just wanted to thank you for how you put it, because I feel like it was in reality the a very clear and more accurate way that it is seen within people in 12-step fellowships. Thanks.
You're very welcome. Anybody else? Oh, you're very welcome, Albert. You are very welcome. Um, I mean, speaking of, just a little bit more, like I had a family member who passed away, and they weren't trying to harm themselves per se. They were recovering alcoholic, and they were also using pain meds. And when life got worse and they got alienated from their family, this is extended family of mine, so I really wasn't in the know-how until it was too late. Um, car was taken away; they weren't allowed to drive anymore. Things along that nature. Family kind of alienated them. Lo and behold, all it took was a glass of wine and a couple of their pain meds that they were generally taking for whatever reason, and that it was they were no more. Right, so it's one of those things that if families were paying attention, reached out for help, because he definitely did want it, but just didn't know how to ask. There's that, that pride and, head of household, no longer head of household, and being alienated does a lot to people. Um, so for me, I wish I had known. I probably could have done a bit more for this individual in my family, but um, when things are kept secret through embarrassment or whatever the situation was, you could see how things can transpire. So, challenges FPAs may encounter: stigma and denial from families of the community. Stigma can prevent families from acknowledging problems or reaching out for help. As I'm telling you now, especially in communities where mental health or substance use issues are misunderstood or judged. Denial often sometimes stems from fear, shame, or a lack of understanding. It's a protective response, not a resistance. FBAs can address stigma by creating safe, non judgmental spaces, using respectful languages, and sharing hope based messages that normalize help seeking. And a lot of us who have been in this role, we know how to do this. If not, we should know where to go get some type of training or bounce some ideas on how to approach a family that we're not sure how to. Reluctance to seek or accept help. Families may be worried about being blamed, labeled, or losing control over decisions if they ask for help. Some of us, have been in the predicament. Families won't do this, especially with kids in the home. They're afraid that, their family will be broken apart if this was found out, right? So it's an optimal reason. So with that fear, you might not be able to step out and recognize that you need help, or you recognize you need help, but what direction do you go without damaging the family? Building trust and showing empathy are key. Meet with families where they are and move at their pace, because this is going to be one of your harder paces to move with a family, contingent on where they are on using and receiving treatment. And then we want to provide education about available supports and emphasize collaboration, not correction or judgment. So co-occurring mental health conditions play a huge role in this. So a lot of the stuff is not just they used a drug one or two times and they're hooked. sometimes that drug mixed with a mental health condition can exacerbate it more. And so now that mental health is covered or overshadowed by the use. So many families face overlapping challenges such as trauma, anxiety, depression, additional substance use, which can complicate engagement and recovery. FPAs can help by recognizing signs of co occurring conditions and linking families to integrated trauma informed services. And then we want to encourage a holistic approach that supports emotional, physical, and social well being. Safety concerns, domestic violence, unsafe environments play a role. Safety always comes first. If domestic violence or child abuse or unsafe living conditions are suspected, we must follow our mandated reporting and safety planning protocols. We want to approach these situations with sensitivity and compassion, avoid judgment while ensuring protection for all that's involved, meaning be aware of your biases and try and leave those at the door when you're working with a family. And again, as FPAs, if we cannot check our biases, this is when you go to your supervisor and see if maybe you might need to change the caseload or your families to another FPA who's willing to and can, because we're working for the betterment of the family and the child. And then collaborate with domestic violence advocates, counselors, shelters, and crisis resources to provide comprehensive and confidential supports. So we're going to look at some of these strategies for FPAs to support our families. So engagement and relationship building, active listening and empathy. I know empathy might be a little harder if you've never experienced substance abuse or it hasn't been a part of your family. But I also encourage you not to play the role of sympathy, because even though a person might be using, they're very aware of judgment unless they're actually really high. Well, like when they're in that mixed zone and they can read right through you and shut down right then and there. So try and be as understanding as compassionate as possible, if not empathetic. So begin every interaction with genuine curiosity and compassion. Families affected by substance use often carry fear, shame, and guilt. So listening without judgment helps build trust and allows families to feel safe sharing their struggles. Empathy communicates understanding and hope, creating the foundation for a meaningful collaboration. Respect for the cultural values and family dynamic. Recognize every family's experience and approach to recovery is shaped by culture, beliefs, and family roles. So that's you doing your due diligence and asking the right questions about the family and their culture. So we approach it with delicate gloves. Honor traditions and language and spiritual practices that provide strength or identity. If a family believes their spirituality or religion can help them through it, it's our job to walk with them through these steps to help them get to the goal that they're trying to reach in their recovery. And let's avoid assumptions. Instead, ask open-ended questions to understand what recovery looks like within their family systems. Remember, the family's still driving. Practical supports, connecting families to treatment resources, inpatient, outpatient, and recovery programs. Help the families to explore appropriate levels of care, from detox or residential treatments to community-based recovery supports. Assist with referrals, scheduling, navigating complex systems that may feel overwhelming, and follow through. Follow up with them. Encourage family participation in recovery planning and aftercare. Again, they have to be at the table, and let's get them to speak on what might work for them and ask the questions that they might have. Providing education about substance use and recovery. Let's offer information about how addiction impacts the brain, behavior, and family relationships, as I did with my story, understanding chemical components, blockage, or flooding of the systems. Educate families on relapse prevention, recovery stages, and importance on ongoing support. Knowledge empowers families to replace fear or stigma with understanding, compassion, and then helping families with concrete needs. because a lot of our families that we work with, underlying the drug use or substance abuse, housing might be at the back front, transportation, they might not have anything to get to these programs, and childcare. So let's address the basic needs, reduce barriers to engage and encourage treatment, and support families and connect into community resources that promote stability and reduce stress. And practical assistance builds trust and demonstrates genuine commitment to family overall well-being. Additional strategies for FPAs to support families is advocacy. We want to support the families in child welfare, school, and court systems because a lot of these tend to play a role when we have families who are experiencing substance abuse. And we want to help these individuals find their voice. So if they're in a place where they're not using as much or it's coming down, there's periods where, depending on the drug, obviously, or the substance, they might have moments when they have more clarity. So in those, that's when we want to utilize them at their best to be able to speak up, tell them what they know, what they don't know, and what they need. And then a lot of this is hard for us as FPAs, right? So self care, especially if we are overly invested, because there might be a similarity in the stories, you might see yourself in them. Manage that compassion fatigue. You need to know when to step away, set up those boundaries beforehand, and take those times to work on yourself, whether it's therapy, exercise, meditation, um, whatever is going to help you manage your daily work and personal lives. Because it working, especially from my personal experience with individuals who might be suffering from substance abuse, it can be overwhelming. And it might take you down a rabbit hole and how you feel and how you could best help them. And if they're not taking it right away, it weighs on you, and then you feel like you might be failing, and then it spills over into your personal life. So always say it up in the beginning, set up boundaries, uh, work schedule, what you do, what you don't do, and then you might have to revisit that during your work with the family if you start noticing boundaries might be being pushed a bit, or they might start calling you off hours or utilizing you as the crisis person. Unless you're in crisis prevention, that's not your job, right? So, continued on organizational standards and what role you are in. Be mindful of those, revisit those, but most importantly, take the time to take care of yourself and be aware of that fatigue. So, a couple of questions. People can come off mute. What are some families? Well, excuse me. What are some ways families may experience stigma when substance abuse is present? And as SPAs, how can you help reduce stigma and create a safe, supportive space for your families? Albert, I see you.
Good morning, everyone. Um, Before I address that question, I would like to thank you for bringing out the fact of, we're not intense case managers and crisis managers. And that's important because we have to know our boundaries. We have to know that there's certain limits and we can only work, within those boundaries to be the most effective.
Change.
Um, but aside from that right there, how can we help the families? Like the therapist Carl Rogers says, be in the moment. Be in the moment. You can think ahead. That way you have options for them when the time presents itself and they're open to those options because we're working with them.
Mhm.
And, in foster care, in courts, they look at people that have substance use diagnosis or dual diagnosis of substance use and mental health. And they find most of them as they're helpless. Oh, that's it. They have an addiction. that stigma right there paints a terrible picture. And it makes, because of that stigma, it also makes our clients feel like they lose hope. Because now they have to shake that stigma. And no matter what they do, they can't shake the stigma, because if they look outside, they see other people as well, just that the other people aren't in their predicaments. So again, we can just be in the moment. We can have resources available. We can have connections with each other as FPAs, other service providers. That way, when they're ready, we're ready.
I like that. Thank you. It's very true. It's one of the things I always say, try and be in the now. And that goes for multiple aspects of what we do individually or in the work that we do. But be in that moment, be in the now, plays a huge role in how we could be present with our families while they navigate. Mona, I see you.
Hello, everyone. I think some of the ways families experience stigma when substance use is present, it's like a silent burden um, that ripples through the whole family, not just that individual, but through every way. Through it touches everyone. It's a lot of shame. Families usually are judged as bad parents or enablers, even when they're doing the best they can with the tools that they do have. Um, you run into loved ones like stop sharing what's happening because of the fear of gossip, rejection, or being treated differently, and sometimes by other family. Um, a lot of parents, I know for me, internalize guilt. Parents and just caregivers, we feel like we failed. I caused the problem, you know, even when the issue is more complex than that. And then I notice we don't trust the system. It's just a lot of mistrust of the system. It's just our past experience, especially with CPS. They coming out, they taking the kids. You get a call from somebody, you don't even know who made the call. It was just a lot of bad experience. You didn't have they running through your house like they own some stuff, checking in there, talking about ain't no food in the refrigerator. Like, who are you? I got something to eat. I got some potatoes. Shoot, I got some milk. I got something to eat, right? And so it makes families feel like watched, but not supported. Um, uh, and what I'm learning too, a culture of humility. Some of these families, it's just a taboo. Like in some cultures, you know, substance use is just not tolerated, and so families are suffer just behind closed doors. And then a lot of times it's just like a going back to the CPS, fear of losing my child, fear of the consequence, and like I said, and just being understood, being misunderstood. So it just don't show up in stigma, just doesn't show up in words, but I know it shows up in tone, policy, facial expressions, and silence. I have learned how to how we can create a stigma and a stigma free and a safe, supportive spaces for families is it's the way we show up. I think Albert was just speaking to that. We hold space, not judgment. Lead with compassion, not correction. I always listen before I label, and I try to check myself because I'm only human. I show up with my biases. So, like, check yourself. And honor each family story. Um, I try to reframe the language instead of what do you do? What did you do? Man, look at what you are doing. Normalize their experience. I try to make like you're not the only one, that's going through this. It's other families because sometimes when you're going through something, you feel like you're the only one. Um, I always try to share that lived experience appropriately and responsibly. I think that's what makes family peer advocates is our transparency. It just makes families feel less alone and more understood. Um, I try to build trusting relationships. I don't try to study a family. I try to see them, hear them, and value them. And I empower and I try not to diagnose. I'm not a clinician. I'm not here to diagnose. And I just honor their strengths, their cultures, and their resilience. And again, just the FPA, our presence alone, it just interrupts the stigma and it replaces it with understanding, respect, and hope. That's what I got.
Thank you. And you're absolutely right. Yeah, you actually made me want to touch on a few things that I constantly talk about, but I wasn't going to bring about this. But some of those, the reason why a lot of us or our families might be experiencing drugs or substance use, a lot of people don't recognize that it might go back to colonialism. So a lot of people don't know that, especially over here in the Americas, that our our natives who were, not just Africans, our natives too, who were put on plantations, how they would get you to work. Part of this stigma is watermelon and cocaine. That's why cocaine was so huge, especially when the crack epidemic happened, and why so many so-called, I hate saying black because I'm red. I mean, I'm native, I'm Blackfoot and Cherokee, but I'm identified. People will identify me as a black man. But this is one of those ways where if you talk about generational, and then when you are uh, poisoned by your governments to do this, yeah, you'll see this influx. So you'll see a huge, influx of blacks selling, and it's in your communities, and so now again, what was stated before, you're afraid your kids are going to be taken away, afraid you're going to be put on the child abuse registry now because you're doing. There's so many reasons why. And if you think about which cultures were affected the most, like a lot of Asians, especially when they were over here building the railroads, what was one of the ways to control them or put them in, or develop a stigma about them? Heroin was thrown into a lot of those neighborhoods and communities to control. And then with the other Native American populations, it was alcohol was a way to, and then now we have a generational sharing and use of substances that could have been prevented. So I do like what Angelica said. Race and poverty is one of the many stigma families face when substance abuse is present. And it's true. It is constantly a threat for those who are experiencing those and don't believe there's any help or no one really cares. So, yeah, thank you for sharing. So, working with children and the youth is important because they're usually the ones experiencing their parents going down this rabbit hole, and they might be carrying the mantle. And I do agree, Angelica, avoid languages that define individuals by their substance. Yeah, because it will happen. So, recognizing how parent substances use impacts children. Children with parent substance use often experience confusion, fear, and instability at home. They may take on adult responsibilities too early, struggling with trust or having difficulties forming healthy relationships. So, another bit about me, my father was a Black Panther, but he was also um, bombarded in the crack epidemic. And my parents were, after I was born, were subject to using. And my oldest sister was put in that parent role, so she never really got to be a kid. So from the age of 10 to 11, she was taking care of myself and one of my other older sisters, and went through a bunch of hard times. And call it God, call it luck. She never touched a drug in her life. She never went down that road, but it was evident, as you're saying, what children will experience. Understanding the impacts allows FPAs to approach families with empathy and trauma informed awareness. And early identification and supports can reduce long term emotional and behavior challenges. So let's create safe space for the youth, right? Children need permission and space to talk about their experiences without fear of judgment or blame. Let's remember this. There's always going to be three sides to a story pertaining to, let's say, if it's just mom and child, so there's the child's experience, the parents experience, and then additionally what else went on because a lot of the stories, pieces or elements might be missing for good or bad reason, whether the trauma is trumping what's going on or not. There's other aspects of the story. So let's take it at face value. Don't shun them for what they're trying to say, because we need to hear what they have to say, because it's going to impact how well they take healing and treatment and receiving services and or trusting people who are in their lives to try and help support them. Safety and consistency, excuse me, builds trust and helps children begin the healing process. Encouraging resilience and positive coping strategies. Teach and model healthy ways to manage stress, such as mindfulness, journaling, creative outlets, or physical activities. Physical activities was one of mine, and I'm a poet, so I think they kind of go hand in hand. Highlight the child's strengths and pass examples of courage and adaptability. This is more relevant and present now than it was back in the 80s and 90s, I believe. And I believe that we are now more in a place of more of accepting and understanding that we can actually um, be more encouraging, as opposed to the shock and awe and what you should do. We want to reinforce the message that their parents' substance use is not their fault, and that they have the power to shape their own futures. Because a lot of us, I was a firm believer I was going to follow down that same path of my father and my mother, having kids at 16, probably uh, using crack, and I actually lived in a part of Harlem for a good part of my early 20s, and I called it crack Harlem, because people would sit on my front stoop and even offered, hey, you want, like, it was a social, you want to drink, you want to smoke this pot, it was like that. And but I believe that I didn't have that addictive personality that would have allowed me to go, and that was just me, and that was without people rooting in my corner. I was always told by my adopted mom, be careful of this, because your parents are alcoholics, you have it in you. Be careful of this, you have it in you. So there was a fear in it, but I also knew what I didn't want to be. But that was, everyone's different. There are exceptions to these rules. Connecting children with youth and parent advocates. I didn't have one in my youth, but I became a youth advocate. So once again, an exception to how I chose to want to give back to my community. Youth peer advocates provide relatable lived experience, supports, and helps children feel understood and less alone. There was a close friend of mine who, because he knew a bit about my lived experience, wanted me to be a youth peer advocate. So we were one of the first ones to CCSI, the Child Services Initiative, that through MHA, we were one of the leading pioneers in Manhattan, New York, the city area, to start implementing this youth voice and what it looks like when we're feeling supported. And I know I come from that background. You don't share your experiences outside the home, but to find to be in a place where these youth were able to share their experiences, but then heard me, and there wasn't a judgment or pointing fingers. It was like, this person not only has a job, but they can relate, and they're not judging me. And the youth kept showing up to our youth groups. These youth kept showing up for whatever programs we might have found for them to help them in their development. And YPA's model healthy coping and self-express and empowerment, especially for youth affected by family substance use. Collaborate between FPAs and YPAs to ensure both the child and family receive wraparound and coordinated care. These connections can help youth build confidence, resilience, and hope for recovery in the family system. Recovery oriented approach. We want to emphasize hope and strength. We focus on families can do rather than what's going wrong. Every family has resilience, creativity, and potential. Hope is a powerful tool in recovery. It fuels motivation and helps families envision a better future. I like to start off with one of these questions, so you might see this as your problem at hand. Now, talk to me about what would it be like if these problems weren't here, if the situation, what does your future look like? And that way it kind of takes the family out of this is always going wrong, this is what's going bad, to envision manifesting a life without the situation at hand that put them in this predicament. And with that, it allows them to start creating a strategic plan to reach certain goals, to pass certain milestones for healing. And then we want to reinforce the strengths, help families recognize their capacity to grow and overcome challenges. I always like to visit, what have you done in your life? And they can see, like, hey, all these are accomplishments, whether it's graduating high school, whether it's making your bed in the morning, whether it's brushing your teeth, these little things can potentially be huge milestones for even recovery. So if you believe you can't do something and you start doing little, let's celebrate these wins. Heightening the importance of family involvement in recovery. Recovery is most successful when the entire family is engaged and not just an individual in treatment. And obviously this is generalized because I've had experience with a family member where we were all present for years and it was just falling upon deaf ears. But it took until the whole family actually, after 2 3 treatment facilities, and this person spiraling downhill, to everyone stepped back, and then with all the information and resources provided before that part, they started to navigate in their own and clean themselves up and have been over a year clean. So there are exceptions, but it's doable. But let's try and get the family more involved for as long as possible. Families provide emotional support, accountability, and a sense of belonging that fosters healing. Individuals, involving families help address the underlying issues, strengthens communications, and creates sustainable change. Celebrating small steps in progress, we recognize every bit of the progress, no matter how small. Each step builds confidence and hope. Celebrations reinforce positive behavior and motivation, and a belief that change is possible. Progress may look different for each family, so validation and encouragement are key. And promoting peer support and community-based recovery models. So let's connect our families to peer-led groups and community programs where they can have shared experiences and gain practical advice. Peer support fosters connections, reduces isolation, and offers real-life examples of success recovery. Community-based approach helps families, see recovery as a shared journey supported by collective strength. So I got a case scenario for you. How would you respond if a parent denies their substance use is affecting the child? And then what are effective ways to reduce the stigma when working with this family? Anyone can come off. I know this one is hard because a lot of us are like, how would you approach this without sounding judgmental? Or
I,
how would
I,
it go
I'm
on?
sorry.
No, no,
I,
go ahead.
I think in my case, because I have direct experience as a parent who was active when my kids were younger, that that I have found that education and understanding what the actual disease is, that it is something that is not about choice. Not, because a lot of people say you're just choosing not to use, even in like rehabs and things. So I think the understanding of what this is and what it creates, and being able to compare what that person feels, that why it's just them, like what I honestly, I think it's by identification over a period of steps to help somebody identify what's really going on in a bigger sense.
I like that. I'm a big fan of providing information on what the substance does physically, mentally. and showing statistics. And, obviously when I get to that point, but when a parent is denying the substance is affecting the child, it depends, right? So sometimes for me, is when did this start? Because sometimes if they started after the child was born, it's kind of one of those reflective things like, what was life like before you started with your child? Have you noticed any change in them as opposed to what they're doing or how they're behaving now? Because sometimes what I've seen is when a parent is using and they have a child, the effective behavior of the child is not necessarily negative, but they take on a parent role and they might start telling the parent what to do and clocking, hey, it's dinner time. Go clean up, go take a shower. I've seen the child now becomes the parent. So it's affecting this child. They're losing that youthfulness, the ability to be a child to make these mistakes, and they're put in a position to grow up faster. Mona, I see you.
I mean, for me, um, I definitely, like, again, I'm always self-checking. So, I definitely would come from a place of empathy, not accusation. Because I know where denial come from, because I was in it for so long. It just comes from that fear, that shame, or that shit was my survival mode. I definitely wouldn't start by challenging the denial directly. I guess I'll continue to focus on building trust, building that rapport, building that connection. So I'll say something like this. Um, hey, I know you love your children and you want the best for them. A lot of parents I've worked with, they felt scared to talk about what's really going on because they don't want to be judged or they don't want to lose their kids. You know what? You're not alone. And my role isn't to punish or to report. It's just to support you and your family. Um, let's talk about can we talk about how things been feeling at home and how the children doing? So kind of like that would be my focus because I want to validate their love. I want to remove that fear of judgment and I just want to create a space for truth. And I know that emerges over time because they
Mm,
don't believe nothing. All they know, I work with an agency, and so they would have to see it and just I would be consistent in that and never label them as the problem, you know, the parent as the problem. So
amen. Yeah, we know that there's a problem at hand, but to
mhm.
sure keep vocalizing that as a problem can be a deterrent. I like what you said with asking, and that's one of the things I do. Ask how the children are doing, and then again, I always bring in an ideal world. What would it look like for you to be in a home that you want, have the job that you want? What do your children want to do? Is there a sports that they're into? What would it look like if you could bring them to these practices and so it doesn't focus at all on the addiction. It just focused on a mind frame of clarity and in a world where maybe they might pick in their head, well, if the addiction wasn't here, I could do this and I could do that, and this might look nice. And it won't necessarily happen then. It might not be the next meeting, but planting these little seeds where they're not being targeted or judged, eventually, hopefully, willingly, will get them to start seeing where you are, what you're hinting at, and they'll start seeing how it's affecting their child, and maybe, just maybe, they'll start taking those steps to, um, for healing and to start stepping away or recognizing that there's an issue and how they want to move about that. Angelica said, some of the families on my case, there are a few youths that are impacted by parental substance abuse. I helped them enroll in a place called The Door, which is safe place for youth. The Door provides healing and coping strategies and support. They have music studio, dance, healing clinics. That's awesome. The Door has two locations in the Bronx and Manhattan. I'm aware of The Door. That's a good resource. And then when addressing parents who deny that substance abuse is affecting their children, it's important to approach them with empathy, compassion, reminding them of their strengths. Use I statements and expressing genuine care and concerns to validate the parent's feelings and show that your primary goal is to support the family's overall health. That's what we're doing. So these are a couple of resources for us to look into when we come across these families. Just do some research. We have our smartphones, we have these laptops, we have our peers. Look into local treatment and recovery programs. See what's have insurance, but do not, or might have a stipend or something that help the family pay for lack of a better word. We have some national resources that connect to the local levels and community-based peer support organizations, whether AA or other types of groups that start helping these families. So another discussion. So in this scenario, a parent tells you, "I don't have a problem. Drinking does affect my kid." How would you respond? I mean, we heard a couple earlier from Mona and Angelica, but this is just for alcohol. I think it might be one of those um, more frequent used substances. How would we respond as an FPA? What direction will we take?
Hi guys.
Hey,
So I would say, like I hear you're saying you don't believe your drinking is impacting your children, and I appreciate your openness to talking with me. I'm wondering if we could explore together how your children might be experiencing things at home. My goal isn't to judge you, but to understand your family experience and ensure your children's well-being. So I'm not going to be like, oh, yes, your drinking does affect it. I want them to tell me how their children's behaving in hopes that they see that their children are being affected without me actually pointing it to them.
I like that. That's a good way to approach it. It's soft. It's not accusing. But then I would also probably ask a question, probably not right then and there, but let's say your drinking could have affected your child. What do you think would be the signs that it is? Kind of just throwing it out there and just see if and see what happens, and then
Or
reflecting upon
something
that
like,
answer.
would you be willing to explore how stress might be impacting your family? Curious about how your children describe feeling at home. I pretty much like use open-ended questions and let it
Mhm.
reflect back.
Exactly. So it's one of those things, and this might be my clinician side, and is we want our families to come to conclusions or realizations on their own, right? I'm not so by getting you to just think about certain situations without imposing a thought that it's your fault, it's your problem. What does it look like from a standpoint? Let's say it was not your child. Would you be able to recognize, let's say your cousin had a drinking problem? Do you think you could recognize if it's affecting your kid? And what would it look like if, they came to you with this situation? How would you suggest help to them? So some of the I like to do a little role play. What would it look like in this situation? And again, it's taking it off of them and putting in they might be projecting their situation onto someone else that they know, but they'll be able to see it in a different light. And they're not gonna look at it as you're judging them. They're almost in the judging seat, but it should be a way to be a positive in a positive way to dissect what's going on, and then developing steps for healing and recovery. So, in our conclusion, family engagement isn't just a service strategy; it's a relationship-centered approach that recognizes the family as a vital part of the recovery process. When we approach the families with empathy, respect, and understanding, we will build trust and open doors to meaningful change. When providing education and practical supports, helps families move from fear and shame to empowering and hope. Supporting both parents and children ensures that the entire family system moves towards stability, healing, and resilience. Collaboration with peer advocates, clinicians, and community partners strengthens the networks of care, ensuring no family has to face recovery alone. And finally, it's important to celebrate every small step forward because recovery and engagements are ongoing journeys, not a single event. Each act of the process or progress represents courage, connection, and growth. Here's some resources I have. So I kind of want to go through the chats to see what some people said. We have Cynthia, possibly describe your observations of the child's behavior in school, attendance, and withdrawal. Come on easy, judgmental, offering services. Let them know you are for them and share your own experiences to help, not rescue. See that their views on how their children are affected. Yep. And Diana said, you can tell the parent, have you noticed the way your child reacts to you when you're under the influence? Also, have you observed that your children are drinking to help cope with what's going on at home? Because some children will start drinking early, right? So these are things that, for the previous slide, that are relevant and things to consider and just to look at. So even just pointing a view to look at and to observe is not a threatening way. It will open up more room for dialogue and then possible recognition that there is an issue with substance, and and sometimes they'll say, I'm not ready to, or you know what, I think it's about time, but where do I begin? And our jobs as FPAs is just to be supportive, cheering them on, and having those resources at hand for when they are ready to take those steps for healing and recovery. So now we have a bit of time before this is ending. I would like to, if anyone would like to come off, share any experience, concerns, or they're working with families like this, anything working for you, anything that's not, open floor. Or that you liked or didn't like this. I am open to sharing.
TJ, I just want to thank you for sharing your experience. I think there's a huge stigma around, how addiction can get started, and, sharing that, you know, with a pain medicine, it could happen to anyone, and, two different people can take the same medication and can have completely different effects around it. So I think there's, a huge stigma around that. So I thank you for addressing that. And, just, I have experienced it with loved ones. And it's, unless you've been in that situation, it's really hard for people to really, understand, I guess. So I thank you for addressing some of the stigmas around that.
You're very welcome. Kateria, so you were gonna say something?
Yeah, I just wanted to thank everyone for sharing their personal stories and, what's working and what's not working for them in the job and their roles. I also just wanted to share, that us being there is maybe some people's only supports, it can be lonely in that role. Um, in my case, I was a Native American um, community health worker, which is similar to FPA, but I noticed that a lot of moms lost a lot of their supports in my community if they weren't allowing their families like to enable them, so just being there, being real, being with them, thanking them for being them with them, for them allowing you to be on the journey with them, and knowing that it's going to take multiple tries, for them to beat addiction, get their children back, but always letting them know that you're not judgmental, that you're there for them, and your continued support and presence in their life, that is what's going to create that trust and bond, um, and also let their children know that they have people that care and support them as well. So I just wanted to add that, but thank you. This has been an amazing, amazing training, and I always enjoy coming to these. So thank you as well, Ashley.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Irene.
Hey, I had a lot of technical difficulties this morning, but I wanted to say the same thing. Thank you, TJ, because I can relate to you so much on all of those levels. I was a kid from the late 70s, and literally crack is what shaped my whole life. It literally changed my life. That drug, it took my family through hell back and left some of them in there. My mom, before she passed, my mother had 20 years clean before she passed. And I wish that there was a FTNYS and family peer advocates and community health workers to really help and reach out. I feel like if we had people like us back then, it would have saved myself, my siblings, and my family just so much hardship. You know, the stigmas, it's like I am the stigma. I know this is just so, it's so touching to me, and it's just so deep to me because, like I said, this has been my whole life. And I just always wanted at 47 years old to now be able to have a community of people who relate, who are not ashamed, who totally understand, and like I said in our training, who want to help. It's overwhelming for me. I just recently lost my husband, literally a month ago, to the use of opioids. And we've been separated for a while, and that was what destroyed my family. That destroyed my whole marriage. It also caused my oldest son his sanity. My son is serving time right now because of drug use, messing up his mind, causing him to be schizophrenic. And I just really appreciate, I can't even express it. We don't even have enough time for me to share how much I really appreciate this, just this class, just this organization, because again, I'm a 78 kid, and that drug life is real, and it's not enough people to acknowledge, assess, take accountability. Is not. And I love all of you guys, even though I don't know you, and I appreciate this organization, and I hope to continue to grow and to get the name out there, and to just be able to help people understand addiction, that it's not something that we want. It is not something that people run to. It's, someone said it earlier, it is a disease. It is in your genes, and it's something that you have to work hard to stay away from. I have dibbled and dabbled, not in the big drugs, but small things myself. And my addictive behavior and personality is, it's controlled. Like you said, I recognize those things. I understand it, and I know what the hell not to do. I have a handle on my engagements with other people who do use, and I never judge. The only thing you can do is help and just be there. And again, I appreciate all of you guys for having that heart and that knowledge and just that want, you know? Like I said, it's not enough time. Everybody who know me know I talk a lot, and it's not enough time. I just appreciate you guys, and let's get this out there. Like, let's do this together. Like the kids say now, let's go.
No. Definitely. Well, thank you for sharing that. And it impacts us to this day. I don't think the substance use is going, especially when times are hard. Rent is crazy, and people losing sense of self, and you don't know where you're coming or going. And all it takes is, it could be a medical situation, it could be a hard time, and we could all be just one time, or like that friend who offers you something, like what happened to DMX. Someone laces marijuana when he was a kid, and he always struggled up until his death, bouncing back to it. And these things they're real, and he was a God-fearing man. But sometimes, even going to church and having faith may not steer you away from going back down that rabbit hole and binge using. Simca, I see you.
Yeah, thank you. Firstly, that was a phenomenal training, and bro, it was amazing. And like, I was talking to TJ this morning about something else, and TJ mentioned as a throwaway that he has this training this morning. And wow! And I was like, I would love to jump on. And this was something very powerful and very important and so needed. And I just want to thank everyone for their shares. And I just want to throw a thought in for perhaps a future training. Not that I'm trying to give anybody any more work, but I would sort of add, and I'm going to share very subtly. Anyone that's been in any peer trainings know that I say that. Lived experience is like salt. A little bit is powerful, and too much is potentially it could be re-traumatizing. So I'll say that in my own lived experience around recovery, and in my own experience around the recovery community and being in and around the rooms, I will say I think that a training around the intersection of addiction and whether it's IDD, neurodiversity, autism, ADHD, that comorbidity and that intersection of addiction and the comorbidity, I think is really, really powerful. It's just something that I've noticed in my own lived experience and in the data that I have observed. That I think it's a stigma within perhaps a stigma. So, but thank you. This is really, really powerful. Thank you.
Very welcome. All right, as Ashley put in the chat, there's a survey. If you could please fill it out. The next training is November, and it's FPAs Managing Peer-to-Peer Triggers and Boundaries. And that will also be by me. And I look forward to seeing you all there. And if you have any more questions pertaining to this particular one, I did leave my email. We have the workforce development email. You can respond or just reach out to me if necessary, and I'll be able to support you, provide resources. So I thank you everyone so much for your feedback and your participation. It meant a lot to me.
Well, thank you so much, TJ, for that amazing training. And you always come with so much wisdom, and we appreciate that. We appreciate everyone who provided feedback and opened up and shared. As TJ said, there is a survey in the comment section. If you want to just take a moment and fill that out for us, we would greatly appreciate it. It helps us to come up with future topics for trainings and lets us know what you need and how we can improve. I also put a couple more upcoming events in the chat. We do have our FPA Lived Experience Cafe that's coming up on November 4th from 12 to 1. The meeting registration is in there. We would love to see you all there. And for supervisors, we have the Supervisor Cafe on 11/11 from 11 a.m. till 12 p.m. We would love to see you there. And Simca has a Real Talk, Real Tools coming up on 11/29, and that him, Kim Kaiser, and Michaela Robinson will be talking about the dangers of passive screen time. So that's going to be important. Again, that's on 11/29 from 10 to 11:30, and we do have the registration in there. We want to thank you all for coming. And
a few more minutes back to your day. Thank you all for coming again, and look forward to seeing you all next time.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a blessed one and a great weekend.
You too.
Self-care. Take care of yourselves.
You too.
Thank you. Have a
Have a
good
good one,
weekend.
guys.